10 days before Northview Church fired its senior pastor, C.J. Johnson stood at the pulpit and preached about temptation, specifically about blind spots. None of us wants to admit that we have blind spots, he told his congregation of 8,800. Areas in our life that are obvious to others, but we keep making the same mistake. On June 10th, 2026, the elders of Northview Church sent an email to their members that made those words land very differently. Northview Church is not a small operation. It operates 14 locations across Indiana, from Indianapolis to Lafayette, and averages around 8,800 in weekend attendance. It was built over decades by founding pastor Steve Poe, who grew it from a single congregation of roughly 500 people into one of Indiana's most prominent non-denominational megachurches. When Poe announced his retirement, the church used Vanderbloemen, one of the leading executive search firms in evangelical ministry, to find his successor. Out of 7 finalists, Jay Johnson emerged as the top choice. He was 36 years old, came from Southland City Church outside Minneapolis, and was widely praised as a gifted communicator. Poe watched one of his sermons and said Johnson was, quote, the clear choice. He took the senior pastor role in 2021. But even at the moment of his hiring, there were already warning signs. Steve Poe himself acknowledged, publicly, that Johnson had faced allegations of mishandling finances and mistreating people at his previous church in Minnesota. And yet Poe told the congregation he and the elders were, quote, 110% convinced the allegations were false. He used those exact words. We will come back to that number. By 2022, as Johnson transitioned into full leadership, the warnings that had been dismissed began to materialize at Northview. A local Indiana publication called Current reported an exodus of dozens of staff members and church leaders. 8 former staff members spoke on record. One said, I care about Northview. I don't want it to sink. But I think it's sinking, and if there's not enough humility, grace, and willingness to have this conversation, it's going to go down. What was the elder board's response? They issued a public statement reaffirming their, and I want you to note the word they chose, their unwavering support for C.J. Johnson. We did do our homework and stand resolute in our conviction that this was God's choice for our church. The following Sunday, Johnson received a standing ovation. That affirmation did not slow the departures. According to former leaders who spoke with the Roy's report, 10 campus pastors had quit by the end of 2025. 10, all citing toxic leadership. 4 sitting elders were reportedly pushed out for not supporting Johnson sufficiently. Johnson allegedly told one of them to stop, quote, sticking his nose where it doesn't belong. Following those removals, all information about the elders and the elder board was quietly deleted from the Northview website. No explanation was given. In January 2025, the elder board received what their June 10th termination email described as a significant allegation. Now we know what that allegation was, and it is serious. Carrie Mosher, 55, of Scottsdale, Arizona, told the Roy's report that C.J. Johnson propositioned her for intimacy during a marriage counseling visit. Her husband, Greg, occasionally attended Northview when in Indiana and had a business relationship with Johnson. When the Moshers went through serious marital difficulties, Johnson flew to Arizona to assist them. According to Carrie Mosher, the visit took a disturbing turn almost immediately. She said that upon arrival, Johnson began making comments that seemed sensual in nature, remarks about her shower, comments about her boots. She said she tried to dismiss them, but she says he continued, pressing further, asking if she had ever cheated on her husband, and at one point telling her, in her recollection, you need to explore your sensual side. You should be having the best enjoyment at this stage of your life. She later told church leaders that, quote, 110% he wanted to do something physical that night. That phrase again, 110%. Mosher said it took her months to come forward. I didn't want money. I didn't want the attention. But it really was so sickening to me. It was so creepy. And I was just shocked to learn the church didn't have anything in place to prevent this. The elders hired an Indianapolis law firm to investigate. The attorney spoke to Carrie Mosher, her husband Greg, and their daughter. Both the husband and daughter confirmed relevant details of the account, stating that Mosher had told them immediately after the incident, and that they had never known her to fabricate stories. When Greg Mosher recalled his wife recounting the incident, he said she shook and started to cry. When the attorney spoke to Johnson, he denied most of the allegations. His explanation for bringing up sex and cheating? He called it a pressure test, a counseling technique. The attorney's final report, delivered in September 2025, described Johnson's account as self-serving and noted it lacked any corroborating evidence. The attorney also reportedly told the elders, where there's smoke, there is usually fire, And what did the elders do with that report? They kept him. In their June 10th email, the board acknowledged the investigation but stated the findings were, quote, inconclusive. Based on that framing, they opted not to terminate Johnson at that time. A man whose accuser's story was corroborated by two family members. A man whose own explanation was described as self-serving with zero supporting evidence. A man whose attorney investigator warned them that smoke usually means fire. They kept him. 9 months later, May 19th, 2026, something shifted. All three of Northview's executive pastors, Kurt Brodbeck, Mike Polster, and Jason Pongrantz, requested a meeting with the elder board. They came not individually, but unanimously. Together, they brought what the church's email describes as additional concerns about leadership, style, interpersonal conduct, and behaviors. The church has declined to elaborate further. That meeting appears to have been the tipping point. With the executive team united in opposition, the elders could no longer hold the line. On June 10th, 2026, CJ Johnson was terminated effective immediately. Mark Krull, who has served as Northview's operations pastor since 2014, has been appointed interim lead pastor. There are a few things that need to be said plainly here. First, the elders of Northview Church were warned. They were warned before they hired Johnson by credible allegations from his previous church. They were warned in 2022 by an exodus of dozens of staff members. They were warned by 4 of their own fellow elders, whom they then removed. And they were warned by a third-party attorney after a formal investigation. At every single checkpoint, they doubled down. The October 2025 decision not to act on the Mosher allegations in the face of that investigative report will be the question this church will have to answer for a long time. Second, the pattern of removing dissenters is not incidental. It is the defining institutional failure of this story. When you systematically remove the people raising concerns and scrub their names from your website, you don't just protect a leader, you dismantle the very accountability structures that exist to protect the congregation. Third, Carrie Mosher deserves to be named, and her courage deserves to be acknowledged. She said she didn't want money or attention. She came forward because it was, in her words, sickening, and because she was shocked that a church of this size had nothing in place to prevent what she experienced. Her decision to speak publicly, corroborated by her husband and daughter, is what put this story on the record. Whether there are legal or civil proceedings to come remains to be seen. And fourth, the elders' email to the congregation ends with an instruction worth noting. They told members to avoid speculation and to take our cares to Jesus rather than to others. There is a time for pastoral discretion, but asking a congregation to stay quiet about years of institutional failure after a formal allegation, a law firm investigation, and the departure of dozens of leaders is not pastoral protection. It is damage control, and the people of Northview Church deserve more than that. C.J. Johnson preached from the story of Samson 10 days before he was let go. Samson, the man whose strength became his undoing, whose blind spots others could see long before he could, whose fall was not sudden but the accumulated result of patterns he refused to address. You will be tempted far greater in the area of your strengths than you will your weaknesses, Johnson told his congregation. Whatever the full truth of what happened at Northview turns out to be, those words, spoken from that pulpit on that Sunday, may prove to be the most honest thing said from that stage in a long time. We will continue to follow this story as it develops. If you are a current or former member of Northview Church and have information relevant to this story, the Royce Report remains an active channel for those accounts. If this video helped you understand what's happening at Northview Church, share it. Subscribe to Via Hosh for ongoing coverage of ministry accountability across the church. And as always, we are watching, so you can discern.